Just picture this for a moment. It's just after midnight, June 6th, 1944. You're on the coast of Normandy. You can feel the damp, salty air. The only thing you can hear is the tide rolling in. Now let's say you're a German soldier on watch. You're feeling pretty safe, maybe even a little bored. I mean, you're standing behind the Atlantic Wall, the biggest, baddest coastal defense in history. If the Allies are ever crazy enough to attack, the fight's going to be on the beaches, right in front of you. But then, you hear something else. A low hum coming from the dark clouds above. For you, and for everyone else on that coast, the war isn't about to start with a huge explosion, it's going to start with a sound. A drone from the sky. So how did this one single sound completely unravel one of the most feared armies the world had ever seen? And this right here, this is the first official report of the invasion. Not about ships, not about commandos, it's about a sky that is suddenly full of engines. A German corporal, Rudolf Thiel, is scrambling for his field telephone. Now, he has no idea, of course, but he's the very first person to officially witness the largest airborne invasion in the history of warfare. That sound he heard, that wasn't just engines. That was the sound of a massive intelligence failure. It was the sound of over 13,000 American paratroopers about to drop out of the night and turn the whole battlefield completely inside out. So to really get why this was such a profound shock, we have to rewind just a little bit, before that drone broke the silence. What was the German mindset? Well, to put it simply, it was one of total, almost arrogant confidence. They knew an invasion was coming, eventually. They'd been preparing for years, and they were absolutely convinced they could smash it and throw it right back into the English Channel. They had a pretty good idea of the what, but as it turns out, they were dead wrong about the when, the where, and especially the how. I mean, just look at the forces they had on paper. This wasn't some skeleton crew. We're talking tens of thousands of experienced soldiers. And they weren't just any troops either. You had the 352nd Infantry, battle-hardened veterans from the brutal Eastern Front. And here's the real kicker. They had the 6th Fallschirmjäger, Germany's own elite paratroopers, led by a brilliant commander, Major von der Heefte. These guys were some of the best in the German military, and they were put there specifically to counter an airborne assault. And it's not like they hadn't thought about this. Field Marshal Rommel, a tactical genius, he knew any invasion would probably have an airborne part. So he had his men install over 1 million of these things. They called them Rommel's asparagus, giant wooden poles, 4 or 5 meters high, stuck in every open field, often with mines strapped to the top. The whole idea was to shred any glider that tried to land and just impale the paratroopers coming down. So the point is, they weren't caught flat-footed by the idea of an attack from the sky. They had a plan. So, if they had the troops, and they had a plan, what went so catastrophically wrong? Well, it really boils down to one thing: overconfidence. The weather in the Channel was just awful. Stormy, high winds. No sane commander would even think about launching a massive invasion in that kind of weather. In fact, their top general, Rommel himself, was so sure nothing could happen that he was hundreds of miles away in Germany for his wife's birthday party. You can't make this up. The German high command literally thought the storm was their greatest ally that night. And then, the impossible happened. That drone of engines got louder, and the sky, it just started raining men. Thousands of what must have looked like ghosts, descending right into the heart of their fortress. All those careful plans, that supreme confidence, it all just evaporated. Poof, gone in a matter of minutes. And this quote, it just perfectly captures how bizarre and confusing this all was on the ground. Imagine you're this German paratrooper, Pressel. You hear a noise, you run out of your tent, and it's not a coordinated attack. It's one single American paratrooper tangled up in a tree, his leg is broken, and he's moaning in pain. What do you even do in that situation? The first contact of this massive invasion isn't a huge firefight, it's this weird personal one-on-one moment. It wasn't an army invading. It felt like thousands of tiny separate invasions happening all at once. And that confusion wasn't just for the soldiers on the ground. It went all the way to the top. You have General Marks, a tough, experienced veteran, and he's looking at the map as these reports flood in, and none of it makes any sense to him. See, in his mind, in German military doctrine, an airborne assault is supposed to be concentrated. You seize one key target, like an airfield. That's how they did it. But these Americans, they were landing everywhere. There was no pattern, no logic. He kept asking, where is the main attack? He couldn't see it, because the chaos was the attack. And here's the truly wild part. This chaos, it was mostly an accident. Because of the bad weather and heavy anti-aircraft fire, only about 1 in every 6 paratroopers actually landed where they were supposed to. By all accounts, it was a massive operational failure.
but it turned into this accidental stroke of genius. Because instead of one big, easy target for the Germans to attack, they now had thousands of tiny, unpredictable ones. The paratroopers just attacked whatever was in front of them, and it created this illusion of a much bigger force. German intelligence ended up estimating that 25,000 Americans had landed, nearly double the real number. They were totally paralyzed by ghosts.
So this chaos wasn't just confusing, it was like a virus. It spread up the chain of command and completely dismantled the German leadership structure. The real plan here, whether by accident or design, wasn't just to fight soldiers. It was to sever the head from the body. It was to break the brain of the entire German army in Normandy.
I mean, just look at this chain of events. It's almost a comedy of errors, if it wasn't so deadly. First up, at 4 in the morning, General Fowley, the guy in charge of the main division in the drop zone, decides to race back to his command post. He drives his car right into an American patrol and is killed. Just like that, his entire division is leaderless. Then you've got his boss, General Dahlman, the commander of the whole 7th Army. Where is he? He's miles away at a war games exercise, practicing how to fight an Allied invasion while the real one is actually happening. And the final, fatal blow? The Panzer tank divisions, the one force that could have crushed the invasion, couldn't be moved without Hitler's personal permission. And Hitler was asleep. And his staff was literally too scared of him to wake him up. You just can't write this stuff.
And as if the accidental chaos wasn't enough, the Allies threw in some intentional chaos just for good measure. They had this thing called Operation Titanic. They dropped 400 fake paratroopers, literally dummies made of burlap, but rigged with explosives and firecrackers to sound like a firefight. And it worked beautifully. It sent entire German regiments on these wild goose chases for hours, hunting down phantom soldiers miles away from where the real fighting was.
And the final nail in the coffin for the Germans? A total communications blackout. From the air, Allied planes were jamming all their radio frequencies, filling them with nothing but static. And on the ground, anytime a paratrooper found a telephone line, snip, it was cut. So pretty soon, German units were totally isolated. They were islands. They couldn't talk to each other. They couldn't get orders from headquarters. They were fighting completely blind. So I really want you to stop and think about this. Put yourself in the boots of a German commander on the ground that morning. Your general is dead, your phone is dead, your radio is just noise, and you're getting reports that the enemy is, well, everywhere. To your north, your south, your east, and your west. So what do? What's the right move? And the terrifying answer is, there is no right move. Any direction you go could be a trap. The safest, most human reaction in that moment is to do nothing, to freeze. And that paralysis, that's what cost them the battle before the sun even came up.
Okay. But it would be a huge mistake to think this was all just about chaos and German mistakes. This was about something much bigger, much more profound. This was a victory of a system. It was about the sheer, overwhelming industrial power of the United States, the arsenal of democracy, that could equip its soldiers on a scale the Germans couldn't even dream of anymore.
Let's just start with this number, 13,348. That's how many American paratroopers jumped that night. And remember, that's just the American jumpers. We're not even counting the glider troops or the British and Canadian Airborne. It took 822 transport planes to get them there. The fact that the Allies could build these divisions, train them for 2 years in England, and gather that massive air fleet all completely undetected, that's not just a military operation, it's a logistical miracle.
And that industrial power trickled all the way down to the individual soldier. Your average German infantryman was carrying a bolt-action Karabiner 98K. It's a great rifle, but it's slow. You fire, work the bolt, aim, fire again. The American paratrooper, though, he carried the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic rifle. He could fire off 8 rounds as fast as he could pull the trigger. Now you tell me, in a close-quarters fight in the hedgerows of Normandy, who has the advantage? That difference in firepower was literally the difference between life and death.
But honestly, it goes so much deeper than just the guns. Just look at the rest of their kit. The German paratroopers, the elite of their army, they jumped with one parachute. The Americans had a main and a reserve. An American soldier had morphine for pain, sulfo powder to stop infection. He had K rations with canned meat, crackers, chocolate, even chewing gum. The Germans were lucky if they had some hard black bread. The Americans even had handheld, handy-talkie radios. Every single item on this list is an industrial advantage, and when you multiply that by thousands of soldiers, it becomes an unstoppable force.
And if you want to know what that really felt like on the other side, this quote from a German soldier says it all. The thing that made him realize the war was lost wasn't a tank or a plane. It was seeing American paratroopers casually eating chocolate in the middle of a firefight. Just think about that. It was the crushing realization that they weren't just fighting another army, they were fighting an entire system, an industrial machine so vast and abundant that it could provide small luxuries like candy to its soldiers in the middle of the biggest battle in history. At that moment, he knew there was just no way they could win.
So what's the ultimate takeaway from all this? Why does this single night of fighting still matter so much today? Because it wasn't just a battle. It was the blueprint for a whole new kind of warfare, one whose consequences we are absolutely still living with right now.
You know, it's fascinating to hear it from the enemy. This is Major von der Heide again, the commander of Germany's elite paratroopers. After the war, he said, sure, the American equipment was incredible, but what really blew him away was their initiative. He said his own soldiers were trained to follow a plan perfectly, but if the plan fell apart, they tended to freeze. The American paratroopers, he observed, seemed to thrive in chaos. They would just form new little groups with whoever was nearby and attack the next objective. This was something new.
This new way of fighting has a name. It's called vertical envelopment, and it's revolutionary because it makes the whole idea of a front line obsolete. Why waste thousands of lives trying to smash through a fortified wall when you can just fly over it and collapse the enemy's entire nervous system from the inside out? Every modern military in the world that uses airborne forces is still working from the playbook that was written in the skies over Normandy.
But the legacy here is even bigger than military tactics. Think about who these fighters were. The German Fallschirmjäger were a professional warrior class, a military elite. The American paratroopers, they were farm boys, factory workers, college kids who volunteered for the most dangerous job in the army for an extra $50 a month in jump pay. And yet, these citizen soldiers, when you give them the best equipment and train them to think for themselves, they outfought the professionals. This was the democratization of elite warfare. It was proof that a free society could create fighters equal to any militaristic state.
And that really leads us to the final question, the one I want to leave you with. What does it actually mean for the world when a nation can combine the initiative of free people with an industrial might so overwhelming it can't be matched? The vertical invasion of Normandy wasn't just the beginning of the end of World War II. It was the dawn of a new era, a blueprint for a new type of power that would define the rest of the 20th century and shape the very world that you and I live in today. It's a legacy of incredible achievement, for sure, but also one that carries some profound and challenging responsibilities.